attention to it. All right. So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Al D. I'm the founder of MBA School. I'm a proud UNC Kenan Flagler MBA. And I'm excited today to talk to you about careers in product marketing for MBA students. And I have a lovely host of panelists who are here to help me do that. They're very great experts, come from diverse backgrounds, and are all really passionate about careers in product marketing and really helping all of you find your own path into product marketing. So just to start, before I turn it over to my panelists, I do want to be able to just kind of get started with just a brief intro just about like what product marketing is, just so that we can all get on the same page. But before I do that, I want to launch a poll and just to kind of see where you all are at right now. So the first poll I want to launch, I just did, is what year are you in business school? And feel free to answer. We'll see where we are at. All right. We'll keep this going. All right. So mostly first years, but we definitely have some second years as well. Perfect. All right. Thanks. Just wanted to check in to see where you're at. Okay. So really quickly, there are your results. And yeah, that's what we have for where everyone's at today. So let's get started and let's jump in. What is product marketing? So I know you all are smart and I know you all use your phones all the time, just like I do. So if you've Googled this question, and I'm sure many of you have, what you'll probably see are definitions like this. So you'll see something, from HubSpot, which talks about how product marketing is the process of bringing a product to market. So things like positioning and messaging, things like being able to launch a product and ensure salespeople understand it. And product marketing is all about driving demand and usage of the product. You might also see the definition from Drift, which is another great resource that talks about understanding and marketing to customers. So they really talk about being able to be that voice of the customer and then to use that knowledge to write positioning or messaging of products in ways that resonate with customers or to drive demand. Or you might see something like from Ada Chen, who you should check her out if you haven't. She's been a longtime marketer, where I actually really love her definition, but it's the role of the product marketer is to accelerate product growth by championing the customer, communicating product value, and driving distribution. So I know you all can read. I know you all have probably researched this, and you're not here because you want me to tell you what I've Googled or what you've Googled. So what I want to do is maybe just get to the reason of why, because there's plenty of things out there that you can read on your own time that talk about this. But when I think about product marketing and like taking the definitions away for a second, what I think about is that there needs to be a function that sits in the middle of a couple other different really important functions that go within the product development process. There needs to be a function that sits within product, right? To make sure that the product and its vision is being accurately conveyed in the market. And there needs to be a function that helps customer success in terms of actually understanding how the product is being used and making sure that that knowledge gets back to the product teams or the engineering team. There needs to be a function that sits within sales and really is there to listen to salespeople, to understand how they're positioning the product, how they're messaging it, how they're hearing the certain objections or the certain complaints from customers. And there certainly needs to be a voice that sits with marketing and the broader marketing engine to help align with the rest of the company. And that's really what the role of product marketing is. So yes, product marketing very much is all of these things, right? And again, I know you can read this, but fundamentally what it's about is making sure that there is someone who's there to be able to take all of these things of being really, really important critical stakeholders and to drive them forward in ensuring that the products are being accurately represented in the market, that they're being messaged and positioned in the right way, and that ultimately they're getting sold and that they resonate with customers. And you're probably wondering why this is, what's there or why is it important? I'm going to give you 3 reasons. Number 1, markets are really competitive, right? It's never been easier to start a technology company, right? You open up an account, you go to HubSpot or you go to Salesforce, you get your CRM, you go to AWS or Microsoft to get your cloud storage, and you're off and running. And a lot of times you can do that just with a credit card. But as a result of that, many markets have lots of competition. The only way to be able to succeed is by having a differentiated product that finds a customer. And that speaks to the next notion. The reason why product marketers partially exist is really helping come up with that unique differentiation. So you're not just another product in a really competitive market, so that customers actually find you and don't find your competitors instead. And then finally, and this is particularly true within the confines of tech, sometimes there are complex technology products, right? That particularly if it's a very tech heavy product that is very technical, sometimes you need someone who can articulate the value prop in a way that actually finds the right customer. And that is actually very clear about what the product is and for who it serves. And so, yes, all the other definitions of product marketing are completely valid, but I wanted to walk you through this just to help you understand the importance of having a function that can work with all of these different teams to be able to overcome these challenges that exist out there in the world. And so, but really, what is product marketing? Like, what does that come down to? So there's a lot of ways to think about product marketing. None of them are completely 100% accurate, but this framing, I think, hopefully will give you a flavor of what to expect and can be a good starting point, particularly for those first years out there who are still kind of figuring out, why would I want to do this? Is this role for me? What do I like about it and whatnot? And so how to think about this. So the first is the idea around audience and messaging, right? And so this is about knowing who is your customer and what are their pain points. You hear a lot of times product marketers need to know the customer or to be able to represent the voice of the customer and be customer centric and being able to understand their pain points. That's really what about audience and messaging is. So here you might do things like knowing the market, like knowing what your competitors are doing. You might do things like research, whether that's qualitative in terms of going out and interviewing customers, or whether that's quantitative. Maybe you're looking at customer data of past purchases, or maybe you're looking at customer data of usage. It's coming up with use cases for products and really thinking about what is the value prop of this product and what are the differentiators. So once you've kind of figured out how do we build the product or what is it, the next phase is all about the go-to-market process. So now that we have it, how do we take it into the market? And for here, it's really thinking about who are we trying to target and why? It's about thinking about how do we do naming, right? How do we do packaging? How do we figure out what channels we want to activate? How do we make sure that we can actually get this to the right people so that they'll buy it? And then last but not least, I have launches, content, and campaigns. So now that we've built the product, now that we know where we want to bring it to for which customers, this is all about making sure we're driving demand of it. So it could be sales, it could be revenue. In some cases, it could be adoption, right? So if you have a product that is a specific feature, maybe you're launching a new feature, instead of revenue, you're trying to drive adoption. And in here, it's doing things like being able to the launch process and creating the collateral for it. It's about thinking about integrated marketing campaigns, certainly working with the rest of your marketing organization to get that information out there. It's about thinking about things like sales enablement, which is making sure your sales teams know how to talk about your products and can effectively sell them. And certainly being able to go and find those really great examples of how your customers are using your product and making sure you're championing them, but you're also capturing those stories so you can take them back to your product teams to continue to improve the product. And so there's a great site out there if you haven't joined it already. It's called the Product Marketing Alliance. But what they did is they actually went out and interviewed hundreds of product marketers and said, what do you actually do? Like, what do you do each and every day? And so this is what the response that they got. And there was kind of a multiple pick list kind of thing. So this is what people said. As you can see in the far left, you'll see things like messaging and product messaging and positioning, which a lot of people do. Certainly managing product launches was another big thing. A lot of folks created sales collateral. And then there's other stuff about market research and reporting on metrics and content marketing and the rest. But this just gives you a flavor at a very basic level of what is product marketing? Why does it even exist? And what do people do in product marketing every day? So I know that this question, what is product marketing, can sometimes be a very simple question, but sometimes take a while to understand. So one of the things that I did just to go out there was just to do it for fun. I asked a couple of my friends who are PMMs to explain me product marketing like you are a 5-year-old, like I am a 5-year-old, excuse me. And so what I actually did was I got a lot of really fun and interesting answers. So I heard everything from, I get people to buy stuff. I teach our salespeople how to speak the right way. I get people to click a button a lot of times. I write stories for adults that makes them excited and wants to make them purchase things. And then I think maybe my favorite, I work at a computer toy company. I work with the guy who makes toys and the gal who sells toys. I try to figure out what toys to make and how to help the girl sell a lot of toys. So this is a little silly, but my point of this is just really trying to get to a fundamental level of what product marketing is, just to help you think about, if this could be something for you. Now, that's all well and great, but what I want to do is to actually give a chance for the product marketers we have here who have their own stories and give them a chance to share them. But before I do that, I want to do another set of poll questions. So let me go over to my handy dandy poll and figure out what we're going to do next. Okay, so if we go to question number 2, all right. So what I would love to know is, where are you in your MBA product marketing journey? Are you just getting started? Do you know a little? Do you know you're going to recruit, but you're not exactly sure? Or are you all in? And I know everyone's at different phases, but want to get a sense of where you're at. Okay, so we're at, kind of 35% just getting started, about 20% just a little, and a good portion of you think you're going to recruit, but it's not definite. And then we definitely have some folks who are all in and ready to join us. All right, let's do that. So there's where we're at. All right, okay, let me go with introductions. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask our panelists just to maybe give a brief intro of who you are, where you went to your MBA, and maybe just a little bit about your current role right now. And to do that, I'm going to go to Vignesh first. Vignesh, would you like to kick us off?
For sure, Al, thanks. He did a great job of introducing me, but Vignesh from Macom's class of 2020. I'm at Dell currently working as a launch product marketing manager, which means heavily involved in go-to-market plans, heavily involved in launch plans, and sales education for new products that we launch. Started working on workstations, which are these really high-powered computers. And like somebody said on the previous slide, I get people to buy computers, and that's what my job is.
Thank you, Vignesh. Great example. Steph, how about you?
Yeah, hi, I'm Stephanie, and I'm from Kellogg, class of 2018, and I'm a senior product marketing manager at Microsoft, specifically within our identity division, which is Azure Active Directory, and I oversee a portfolio of about 2 to 3 different product areas within that. So definitely relate to a gamut of those tasks that Al shared on the previous slide.
That's awesome. Thanks, Steph. Maxine, how about you?
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. So I am the newbie of the group. I actually interned at Salesforce just this summer, and I'm currently a second year at USC Marshall. In terms of the team that I sat on Salesforce, I sat on their technology service delivery team. And what we are and who we are, we basically represent our global infrastructure, and I focus on marketing some of our strategic projects and our features of our infrastructure. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out or comment at any point.
Great. So let's start with you, Maxine, because I'm looking at you, and we'll let John introduce himself a little bit later. He just had a little bit of a work emergency, so we'll come back to him and give him his airtime. But let me start with you, Maxine. So you recently just wrapped up your internship. Would you mind maybe just walking us through just a little bit about what it was and maybe 1 or 2 of the projects that you worked on?
Sure. So I guess I could talk about 2 of my biggest projects. One of them was creating our customer personas. So when we sell our Salesforce products, we typically have to think about, okay, how is our platform going to run? Is it highly available? What is the performance of our product? And how can we improve these features? So one of the things I did was to first break down who our customer personas were. So whether we're trying to sell the product or enable strategic selling of the product, or we're thinking about how can we quickly close the sale even faster, we need to have our teams talk to CIOs, CTOs, and really understanding what their true, I guess, what were their key pain points were, and what would help, why would our product help their customers perform even better. We needed to really highlight those key aspects. So one of them was creating customer personas, and then second one was organizing a fully virtual customer council where we brought over 8 of our most strategic customers all in one room to get some of their feedback and feed that into our own product roadmap, and to enable all of the CIOs and CTOs on the conversation to really help elevate this kind of discussion. So these were all very strategic projects, and to be able to have this kind of work, especially at an intern, when I've typically heard these type of projects might go for senior PMMs or even higher up, I felt, really grateful to have that. So those are kind of the projects I worked on.
That's great. And thank you for sharing some of your experience of what a PMM internship could be. Just one more follow-up question for you, Maxine. What do you think were maybe 2 or 3 skills that were helpful to you in terms of actually being able to be successful in your internship? And the reason why I ask is because many first years are going to be really thinking about how do they position themselves in the right way to show that they're an effective candidate. So could you share maybe like 2 skills that were really valuable to you this summer?
Yeah, I think because, we're all fully virtual now, I think 2 of the biggest skills, one being flexibility and then one being prioritization. So with flexibility, you're going to be running into, so many inputs from all different directions. You really need to be able to understand how to be flexible with understanding what the priorities of, yourself are, your managers are, your VPs are, and to really kind of put that together, and then leading that up to prioritization. Once you get all of these inputs, how do you know which is most impactful for your team? And I think that constant alignment is crucial so that you can help prioritize the projects, especially since you only have 12 weeks. You really want to make sure that you stand out and do a great job.
Yeah, I think that's great. And Maxine, and on that notion, I think, to the slide I showed earlier about kind of sitting at the center of all those different stakeholders, to Maxine's point, that's also part of the reason why you need to be really adept at working cross-functionally, because, I'm sure to Maxine's point, there are times when she was getting input from engineers, times she's getting input from product managers, times she's getting input from sales teams, and you need to know how to engage and interact with all of them. But in order to do that, you also kind of need to know what they do and, what they're metriced on, because a lot of times that informs, why they're telling you a certain thing. A lot of times salespeople want to tell you to build a feature because it's going to help them close a deal or help them, hit their quotas and things. And that's probably a good thing sometimes, but sometimes it may mean that you need to really listen to what the product managers are saying in terms of what they see as the product vision. And so I think that is one of the things I think you highlighted really well in terms of being able to work cross-functionally and to listen to a bunch of inputs and to figure out, what makes, the most sense. I want to head over to Vignesh for a second. So I know, Vignesh, because we've talked about this previously, how did you kind of decide on product marketing? And if I remember correctly, I think you were also considering product management, which I know only a few of you are thinking about. And by that, I'm being facetious. I know a lot of you are probably thinking about that. And so could you maybe walk us through, how did you decide on product marketing, and also maybe also give a little color as to like how you decided it was that versus product management?
Yeah, and I mean, not in taking a leaf out of your book here, not trying to be facetious either, product management isn't something that is completely uninteresting to me. Just candidly, I think it's reasonably adjacent, and I think both of them are extremely interesting fields. But for me, I think what really made the difference was, I think I like explaining or taking business problems to customers and helping them realize the value of what somebody builds. And I'm not saying that a product manager can't do that, but a product marketer, as you said, kind of literally does that, is to see, can I take this complex software or hardware solution and kind of go understand how I can help my customers and how they can use this and how I can eventually sell that and make money, but along the way, also deduce that complexity into something that's useful in the market. And I think just just the fact that product marketing lies closer to that end of the spectrum as compared to product management, where, yeah, sure, you are tuned into the market, but a lot of your focus is on delivery, is on speed, is on agility. It's a little bit of a different universe, which is also challenging. But I think for me personally, being able to impact a customer and the challenge of understanding them and drawing up personas like Maxine was talking about, I think just being closer to the customer while not moving away from the product was I think what sealed the deal for me finally. But like you said, it's a thin line, and you scratch a lot of the same bones when you try to get into product management versus marketing. But yeah, it's understanding the customer.
Sure. And just as a follow-up to that, when you were kind of going through your recruiting journey, how did you figure out that product marketing was for you, right? So I know you talked a little bit about some of the things that interested you, but I also know one of the things that often comes up is that it looks a little different everywhere, right? And so trying to like understand what it is like is a little hard. So could you maybe share a little bit more insight into that? Because I have a feeling some people out there right now are thinking like, oh, like I kind of get it. Like, yeah, like it makes sense, but like it looks a little different everywhere. So can you maybe share a little bit about how you were able to kind of ascertain your kind of interest based off of looking at a bunch of different opportunities?
Yep, I can. And again, it like you said, it's a vague line and it's a thin line, and I'm not trying to say that this is the one answer. But if I had to, I guess this is how I viewed it to myself was, do I like building things more, or do I like selling them more, or do I like bringing them to market more? And I think that's a question you could ask yourself. And for me, building things was challenging, but almost taking that and making it a reality was really what I guess motivated me. And again, not saying that building things isn't interesting or challenging at all, but just saying that if you really had to make the choice between the two, I felt that when I asked myself that question, and this was just conversations with second years, with alum, with people who were working, came to realize that that's fundamentally what people were asking me was, are you a person who has a vision and wants to see this thing built at all costs? Or do you think that you can take a great product and kind of make sure it reaches the right people and reaches the right people in the right way? And so that's the first question. Do you like building versus selling? And I think the second part of it was, I like talking to people. I think fundamentally, whether that be sales, whether that be customers, whether it be my PM. And I think PMM puts you at a more conversational, at a position where you have to make arguments, where you have to convince people, and where you display a lot of empathy. And I think recognizing that's suited my skill sets. If you're a person who likes to convince people, if you're a person who likes to win an argument, if you're a person who likes to prove the market wrong, then product marketing is for you. If you're a person who likes taking nothing and making it to something, then product management is maybe more for you. It's a lot about product management is about understanding the strengths and weaknesses of your team and getting the most out of them. Product marketing, I think, is understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the market and taking that product to the market. So it's the same skills. It's understanding people. It's winning arguments, but it's different people. Product management is more intimate with your team. I think you really need to know strengths and weaknesses, what people want to do. Versus in product marketing, you're talking to a different customer every day, and it's you don't have any you sometimes don't have working relationships with them, but still have to be able to display that empathy, that you can see where they come from. So I think, like I said, small differences, a lot of the same skills, but I think building versus selling was a big deal, and convincing people on a daily basis and trying to win arguments to customers and clients was also a challenge I liked. So I think just how did I come to this conclusion? Through conversation, through talking to people. There's no secret sauce that gave me a eureka moment. It was the process of learning. But yeah, looking back on it, I still think those are the key differences. And at least for me, that's what helped me make the choice.
Thanks for sharing that. And one thing I always encourage people to do is to think about who would you rather spend more time with, right? Because as either a PM or a PMM, you spend a lot of time with the same stakeholders, but to the degree that you spend time with them is going to vary just a little bit. And so, and also I was going to say is if you like spending time with engineers, well, that's an easy answer, right? Because you probably will do more of that as a product manager. Okay, great. Thank you for answering that. I know it's top of mind for some folks. I want to move over to Stephanie now. So Stephanie, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, which is very timely, is because you wrote a blog post on MBA School last year, and I'm going to put that link in the chat. But one of the things you wrote about was just this idea about how to align your interests and skills with the product marketing role. And many first years are probably going to have to go through that process if they're not going through it right now. And so I know you previously worked for a pretty good consulting firm, if I would say so myself. But could you maybe also just share a little bit about how you went through that process, just so that people have a template to think about as they start to go through it themselves.
Yeah. I think with any self-reflective process like this, you're all having to think a lot about what you bring to the table as well as what you want to do. And I think it's extremely important to be very honest about both ends of that spectrum. I think you covered this already a little bit, Al, with like, you know, thinking about all these different roles. It's very tempting to want to throw darts at every single thing you could possibly drop your resume for. And that's hopefully what things like this will help to do. But equally important is, what do I bring, and can I be realistic about that? Especially this being your first step, looking at an internship, you just haven't had that much time to really go through a rebrand, if that's what you're looking to do, or accelerate your career. You're just kind of still a little bit early in the MBA process. So when I was personally thinking about how to recruit, I had Deloitte Consulting on my resume, which was kind of nice, and it could mold really into a lot of things. But I also realized that, not having had any kind of engineering or product building experience where I was literally building like actual technical product, I realized, product management was really not going to be a realistic goal. And furthermore, when I thought more about whether that aligned to what I like to do, what I was naturally good at doing, it felt like it could be a possibility, but not one that was very realistic in that short time frame of recruiting. Secondly, I grew up in the Bay Area. I've always been surrounded by tech. I had interned with primarily, well, I guess it was a hardware company, but I was kind of in a software-ish role. So I knew I was going to have a lot more of a chance looking at B2B companies as well. And so, I know Kellogg in particular, there's a whole lot of emphasis on consumer products, consumer marketing, and it's sometimes, the shiny, sexy stuff that everybody wants to look at. But if you are thinking about all the people that are recruiting for the same roles, you have to think, like, am I do the experiences I bring, do they look like somebody who's a B2B marketer or a B2C marketer? And I was definitely more on the B2B category, and had a lot to say about doing that job well, even though I had never formally been in a product marketing role. And then I think just thinking also about what you like to do, what you're naturally oriented to do. It's, again, all too easy, and I'm very empathetic to how quickly it is to envision yourself in the role that people around you are describing. So I would go to every single lunch event with every single employer, and they would talk about how great the job is, and maybe 80% of the time I would be like, oh, I can see myself doing that. And in reality, you can probably all figure out how to do any job. You're all very smart people, but it's, again, not about what you can do, but what you want to do. And when I was, 6 or 7, I remember making greeting cards in a box and then creating a brochure for it and thinking through all the collateral that I needed to make in order to start selling these cards. And, I loved the creativity of craft. I loved also being able to talk to people and feeling persuasive. And I liked thinking about, the calendar, like, Christmas is coming up, I better make more holiday cards. Mother's Day, I gotta make cards for all the slackers who haven't made their own cards for their moms, and I'm gonna upcharge them. So, thinking about just experiences in your life and how you're naturally wired, I think will go a long way into making the recruiting process less painful, but and more importantly, making sure that once you're in role, you can succeed. So, again, with internships, I definitely just caution, like, wanting to look for something that's a stretch, but not too big of a leap. And if you haven't ever been in tech before, just being, again, really realistic about how technical of a role do you want to walk into. And sometimes that's going to be company dependent. Microsoft in particular is very engineering forward. So, looking at even the range of product marketing roles, I knew that there were some that I was going to target as an intern that I would later move out of. But it took phases, and it took a lot of honesty and reflection along the way. I think you're on mute, Al.
I am. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Maybe just really quickly, could you maybe drill down on, because I saw it come up a few times, and I know it's in the deep kind of interests of probably your brethren at Kellogg, this idea around consumer, right? And in particular, I think maybe through the lens of like thinking about maybe traditional kind of marketing and brand management CPG versus like, within the realm of tech marketing in terms of, at least from your experience, like
Yeah.
would you kind of go one way or the other? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think I shared this in the chat. Full transparency, I did interview for like 1 or 2 CPG companies just kind of on a whim. And also because I had that lingering question where I was like, I'm at Kellogg, should I try? Should I throw my hat in the ring for this? And I did. And I did not enjoy any of the questions I was asked. There were some thought questions that I thought were kind of fun, but in reality, I think the interview itself was very telling to me that I was not interested in the kinds of challenges that they were trying to solve. I do think that the philosophy of a brand marketer or CPG marketer being at the hub of a wheel that looks at market prices and supply and demand and manages a P&L is somewhat similar to the model that Al showed of a product marketer being at the center of engineering and customer success and sales and a whole ton of other spokes. So you are at the center. I do think that what's on the end of the spokes is different. Is different. So I don't personally, I'm not at a stage where I manage the P&L. P&L is owned by engineering because they know what the cogs are for development. And so they ultimately, they contribute a big part to it, and they ultimately are accountable for the P&L. However, the P part of the equation is owned a little bit more by our business planning team. So as a marketer, I see both ends. I work with finance to try to understand the market. I contribute to their projections, gut test it if it feels right. I work with I work with product to understand, they're going to know the technical architecture and like how they can shave costs or whatnot the best. But sometimes I can weigh in and see if there is stuff we're prioritizing that maybe shouldn't be prioritized, but ultimately I don't own it, I influence. Another kind of difference between brand and tech, at least in my area of tech, is I don't get those fancy reports that my friends at all these CPG companies get every week that tells you, oh, your product is number 5 right now, selling cereal, or, this is what's the projection for consumer interest in buying, XYZ, and, we're all at home, so people are buying joggers, not jeans. Like, I don't get those because it's a much longer buying cycle for most B2B tech. It's also a much more complex sales cycle. It's not a one-to-one. So I could influence part of a huge deal, but I can't exactly always attribute what content or inbound activities I've done to exactly reel in that big customer. And so, it's a little bit more vague sometimes. So if you really thrive off of that instant, like gamified kind of experience of seeing exactly how your product is doing, I don't know that tech or B2B product marketing at least is necessarily going to give you that. Ultimately, I was more interested in the kinds of problems that I was able to solve with tech recruiting versus CPG. But I still enjoy walking around the grocery stores and looking at stuff. But I'm just personally glad that that's not my day-to-day of having to do that level of consumer research. I find it interesting, but not enough to spend all my time on.
Great, thank you. All right, so John, I want to go over to you. And first I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself because you're running double duty when we did intros, but now that you're back, so feel free to just give a little bit about yourself and what you're doing now. And then, my question to you, I think you're well qualified to answer this, is maybe just talking a little bit about how there might be differences across maybe B2B and like B2C, or just in general, some of the different types of companies. And part of the reason why I want to ask you is because you've worked at a number of different diverse type of tech companies, and I think you might have a good background and understanding of why product marketing could look a little bit different at some of these places. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Al. Yeah, I guess, I have an interesting story. I call myself kind of the accidental product marketer. I don't even think I have product marketing in my title officially right now, but certainly the job description covers PMM to the T. And like I said, a very unconventional background of kind of how I got to where I am. I came out of Ross, thinking I was going to go into strategy. So I took a path that was more of a finance strategy type of path. But at some point, I was like, I really got interested in marketing and took a path of, doing more of the growth hacking, like growth marketing aspect of it with a startup. And then that took me over to doing strategy and operations in marketing over at Twitter. So I think that gave me a good insight into, I think what you're alluding to, Al, what's the big difference between B2C and B2B marketing? And I think, there's, a lot that I've learned throughout my journey, because I think for me, it was a lot of self-discovery. What do I enjoy doing? What aspects of product marketing really resonated with, from my experiences of working all across these different roles. And, for me, I really enjoy looking at areas of growth and thinking about how do I tell a story, and then how do I put that all together in a strategy to get that in front of the right people and the right audiences. I think coming in and going across all these different career paths, I think product marketing really puts you in the center of all of that. And, been lucky to land in the role that I'm in now, where, we have the full control over the offering. We get to decide, all right, what are the products we're working on? How do we tell the story of those products? How do we go to market? How do we look at the different personas? How do we segment? So, but with that said, let me jump back to your question. What's the difference between B2B and B2C? For me, it's how do you talk to your audiences that jumps out the most. So for B2B, it's, you work a lot with the sales team. So a lot of your time is spent on sales enablement. How do I get the materials to my sales counterparts? Making sure that they have case studies that they can present to their clients, making sure that they have, decks, videos, and what's that story that I want my sales team to go into and talk about? And then, arming them with things like, hey, here's the competitive intelligence I have that I know your customer is going to ask about, and how do you make them successful? I think you'll also, work with other channel teams, and you'll run email campaigns and influence email campaigns, and social and all these other channels. But I think the biggest difference that I've seen is your sales team is your primary partner in addition to your product team. On the consumer side, and that's where I've spent more of my time at the moment, is working and thinking about more of the consumer side of PMM. It's more of how do I directly reach that end user, that end audience that you're trying to talk to. And a lot of things that you focus your attention on is, for me at Twitter, it was talking to the performance marketing team. How are we reaching them through paid, through social, talking to the email team, and, working through those direct channels. You're really thinking about, growth. You're looking at things a little bit more closely on the acquisition side. So it's just, again, I think the big thing is how do you reach that end user, and in what methods? I think it really depends on a little bit of, I would say, like your personality too. If you really want to jump in there and get dirty with data, and I think you see a lot more of that with, I would say, on the consumer side, because you're kind of, I don't know, I saw it more like a kind of growth type role, where you're really thinking about like user acquisition. How do I look at the numbers? Where, not to call the B2B side a little bit, not as focused on that area, but you do have, a demand gen team and a sales team that carries a lot of that work for you. So, those are some of the bigger observations. But, again, it's, who do you want to talk to? Do you want to talk to, corporate decision makers on the B2B side, so trying to pitch it to senior leadership? Or do you want to talk to, an everyday person, which is a totally different type of conversation and role? So yeah, I'd say that's what I've seen kind of through those different types of B2B and B2C roles.
Thanks, John. I think that's a great point. I think the other thing that I would add is like something to think about is what is a product, right? And in Vignesh's case, it is an actual laptop. In my case, it's a piece of software or license to a piece of software. If you're a PM or PMM at Facebook, it could literally be a button. And so that has a lot sometimes to do with what you're being asked to do or how the team is structured. And so I think that's something to maybe think about and keep in mind when you're evaluating different opportunities at companies, regardless if they're B2B or B2C. I also think sometimes it can be unique, and I think probably Vignesh and Stephanie maybe feel this a little bit of when you're at companies that are both B2B and B2C, right? And so when you're Microsoft and you're slinging Azure, but you're also slinging Xbox, right? And Surface, right? And, there's a lot of times they have ways in which they structure and whatnot, but, sometimes it can look a little different, wherever you go. So the key takeaway though, is I think part of this has to come out in some of the research that you do in terms of, talking to people and getting a better sense. And also I think the more people you talk to, the more companies you come to, I think the more you learn to kind of frame up and size up, what the opportunities are. So what I actually want to do now is I want to go back to a slide I showed earlier, and I just I want to well, actually, no, here's what I want to do. I want to go to a poll question, and the poll question that I want to go to is actually I'm going to bring up this slide if you give me 1 second, and I would love to kind of know what actually sounds interesting to people. If I can just do this. So what I would love to be able to know is, and it looks like, sorry, 1 second. Yes, here we go. I would love to know, what do you actually like? Like like you pick up to 3, but like, what do you actually like out there? Do you like product messaging and positioning? Do you like managing product launches? Do you like creating sales collateral? Do you like doing customer market research? I know it's early on, so you're still probably figuring this out, but like, what are the things that you think are interesting that are out there? Give it a couple more seconds. All right. Okay, so it looks like you all want to do messaging and positioning. You all want to manage product launches, do some research, and then do some roadmap planning. Okay, so what I want to do now is going back to our panelists. So maybe Vignesh, could you maybe talk a little bit about which of these you probably spend the most amount of time on?
Depends on the day, Al. Depends on the day.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
But no, I'd say product messaging and positioning and product launches for sure, because that is, I guess, fundamentally my job description is to be a launch marketer and is to make sure we succeed when we go to market. And I combine both of those because a lot of my, I guess, in terms of a timeline, when we start thinking about product messaging and positioning, it kind of, unless something drastically wrong happens, immediately is followed by a product launch, because we've nailed on messaging, we've nailed on positioning, and ostensibly have a product that needs launching and needs sales training. And that brings me to the next one, which is probably creating sales collateral, but I'd caveat that by also saying being very hands-on with the sales training itself. Which is kind of like this, is a Zoom call with a lot of salespeople sometimes, and a lot of questions back and forth about the product, about why we think it should be sold the way it's sold. So the first column for sure, I think I have done, and I mean, I'm reasonably new in my role, so maybe this isn't a fair representation of what my whole year looks like, but so far, I'd say we do customer and market research, and a lot of the other stuff you have on the screen there, but I don't think it takes up a lot of the space in my brain as much as messaging it and managing the product launch itself and training sales. I'd still say the first column there for me is probably what keeps me up at night sometimes.
That's great. Thanks. Stephanie, what about you? Where do you think you spend the most amount of time?
I would say I wish I could spend more time on research and messaging and positioning, but it's a huge part, but I never get as much time as I want there. I probably spend most of the time on on the launches and collateral building, all the inbound stuff. And then I actually spend a good chunk on product roadmap as well, not just planning, but like seeking to understand what they're building and whether it's being bundled and released in an appropriate manner. So I wish it was more on the left-hand side.
That's fair. John, how about you? Where do you spend the most of your time?
I guess, yeah, it depends on the day of the week. I've probably covered almost all these items. Again, I think for on our end, it's really around the product launches, but that covers so many different areas. I mean, it's anything from, the messaging, looking at the personas, to working with, analytics to see how performance is doing, competitive intel, spending a lot of time understanding, what areas we're trying to go into, because we also do a lot of the kind of the visioning and directing the product team on where we want the product to go as well. And then I really serve as the voice of the customer. So, our product is directed at farmers. And even though I've never farmed a day in my life, most of the marketing teams do kind of look at me to kind of sanity check, like, hey, is our messaging on point? Are we covering the right things? Just because I spend a lot of my time talking to our field reps and our sales team to understand what they're seeing out there and how they're communicating to their farmers and growers. So a little bit of everything on my end.
That's great. And Maxine, I know you talked a little bit about what you worked on over the summer. So I think my question for you is going to maybe be a little bit different. And so, I think there's a lot of first years who are on the call right now. And one of the topics that came up was just about like what backgrounds or roles are good for PMM. And so I'm going to give an answer, but I want to have you chime in, and I want to say like everyone can use their own background to kind of transition in. But maybe could you share a little bit about your background and kind of how you positioned yourself so that you could land a product marketing internship?
Sure. So I guess before my MBA, I actually worked as an entrepreneur in the CPG industry, and then I transitioned to working in clean tech, specifically automotive, both B2B, B2C, and as a program manager and as a product strategy specialist. So I kind of have some experience just doing a lot of like a different variety of tasks. And I think that goes to why I think my previous skill set could have been so valuable for product marketing, is because I've been able to sit in roles that I've been close to sales. I've sat in roles where I'm closer to engineering, and I've sat in roles that I'm closer to customers, even trying to understand, again, what their needs are and how do you create a product that will, fit their needs. And I think having that variety of skill set is very critical to be an effective PMM, because you really have to translate these insights that you get, from our customers, and then you have to relay it over to your internal teams to make sure that they're not creating a product that's not going to sell, right? And I think sitting there, like in that seat, it gives a lot of like sense of purpose, because you feel like you can make an impact and you can see things that maybe other internal team members can't see. And so I think being able to help position that is really important.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that's great. And like what I always tell people, what's very meta about recruiting for product marketing is that it's actually an exercise in product marketing, except that the product is you and it's your job to kind of position yourself. And the one thing I always encourage really people to think about is to ask themselves, like, what is their superpower, right? And that superpower is going to be like that unique value prop that you have that makes you differentiated for the role. And that really comes back to kind of what you were able to do in terms of articulating some of your skills and experiences in a way that was going to be relevant to the role. So I love that you were effective and able to do that. Well, that's great. So I want to go, as I'm looking at the comment, I'm looking at some of the chat questions here and just making sure that, we've answered some of them in the right way, but I just want to read a couple that kind of came up quite a bit. There's definitely quite a bit around, who does what in terms of what do PMMs do versus what PMs do. There's definitely quite a few around B2B and B2C and kind of the differences and nuance there, particularly with respect to maybe CPG versus doing something more tech and marketing focused. And then it looks like a little bit more about some of the things in the role itself of who you work with. I just saw some questions about working with engineers and the like. And so the good news is that these are all the questions you should be asking, particularly to learn about product marketing. So I would just say, continue to continue to kind of iterate or work on them, as you kind of learn more about the role. I want to go back to maybe Stephanie for a second. I'm curious, just in your role right now, just because we've touched on it a little bit, but can you just share a little bit more about how you work with your product managers? And then maybe secondary to that, maybe your engineers. I just have seen this question about how much PMMs work with PMs. And so I figured I'd let you kind of take a stab at it because I know you do that.
Yeah, I would say that my relationship with my product managers is the foundation of me being able to do my job. I came into my role and into a part of the portfolio that really hadn't had a full-time product marketer for some time. So internally, we would talk about how there wasn't a clear picture on the marketing side of what exactly was the strategy for this product area, what was the timeline, what was going to get built. And I really had to jump in and win trust quickly. And so I would say my approach to that relationship is really collaborative. It's very dependent on me being super in lockstep with what's happening. So when I said that I spend a lot of my time on roadmap, what that means is, I have weekly or biweekly syncs with a lot of different folks on the PM team, including people who are very high up in planning strategy, all the way down to people who might be managing a specific set of features. And I have that time booked, usually just to understand what exactly is being built, what are they hearing from the customers that they're working with, and what's coming down the pike that I need to be ready for in terms of a launch perspective. And likewise, I like to share my plans as a marketer just for their visibility. I find that in a lot of tech companies where, especially if there haven't really been a strong product marketing or business relationship before, engineers and product managers, I should say, are owners. And with that ownership mindset, sometimes you have people who are going to do the marketing for themselves. And so if you don't want that to happen, or if you want to make sure that they're working with you on it, it's important, at least what I've learned, is to share, like, what is the plan? What kind of research am I doing? And are there questions that they would find useful from a messaging perspective that would help them think about it from a product perspective? Are there audiences that they know for sure that they are targeting or that they've heard from customers that would be good for me to validate? Can I use my research time more effectively by looking at what their UI UX researchers have already studied? Similarly, as it comes closer to launch, I like to share all the collateral that I'm working on. I just believe in oversharing to the point where sometimes it gets repetitive, but we both rely on the information that we have to do our jobs well. And somebody asked, isn't it frustrating that it's so messy? And I agree that it's very fluid. Sometimes the amount of influence that we will have on either area, but at the end of the day, as the marketer, I'm accountable for taking it to market, and I own message and the story. So if there's anything out of sync, that's on me, and it's my call at the end of the day. Likewise, if there is a dispute about what's happening with the product or a feature that's being prioritized or a technical challenge that they need to find some creative solution to, the product manager owns that. And so I might have ideas about, you should be really prioritizing this or that feature in the next quarter, but they own it, and that's ultimately what they have to do. So I think we respect each other's accountabilities, but we weigh in all the time on everything that we're doing. And over time, with that trust relationship, now I think there's just a lot of goodness that comes my way because people know that they can count on me for things. And it's like in any work environment, nobody wants to do stuff outside of the job that they're supposed to do. And once it's very clear that, hey, like the PMM is going to do a great job of taking my product to market, I don't have to worry about the sequencing of all these communications and the, you know, the marketing piece of it and the collateral. I'm going to just let them do it. It's really wonderful. And I actually see a lot of things that they bring up to me that I might not have been aware of otherwise.
Great, thank you for that. And I just felt it was important to address because there's getting a lot of questions about PM and PMM and how they work together. Well, we're coming up on time here. Before I go any further, I just want to give a thanks to our panelists who did such a great job kind of sharing their story and their experiences. So let's definitely give them a virtual round of applause. But just in terms of where we go from here and, you know, next steps, if this was fun and was interesting, we're certainly going to have more opportunities for all of you. So a couple things you can do. So number one, if you go to mbaschool.com, I have a whole corner on product marketing that has a lot of great resources. I also have a free PMM guide. So if you just go to that link there, and then we're trying to figure out what we're going to do next. So if you have any ideas about what you want to hear, particularly with respect to product marketing for the next event, feel free to email me and let me know because we're working on that. But thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate you being here, and we hope to see you again soon.